Welcome back. After the last video, I received many positive comments on YouTube about the content of the last video and how it was recorded. A few questions have been asked and I've done my best to answer them as well. I'll try to continue to cover the extra information people are asking for, both through the comments and also if anything requires more detail, I'll try and do a video specifically on the topic. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been working on tuning and setting up for proper recording. I ordered a microphone off eBay for 27 Australian dollars, a BM800 microphone based on reviews on YouTube by others. And so far I'm quite impressed. For such a cheap microphone, it actually sounds quite good. Mind you, it's not the only thing I'm using to get the audio at these levels. I'm also using a proper scissor stand to bring the mic up to my face to keep the signal to noise ratio at a good level, as well as a pop filter to prevent the noises I was having to cut out in the previous recordings. The output of this mic is feeding through a mixing deck I picked up secondhand. It was faulty. I managed to repair this thing. It was a Eurorack 1002 FX. Had a couple of noisy potentiometers that needed cleaning out and repairing, but after that's done, it works fine. To reduce noise in this room as well, to prevent it feeding through to the mic, I've actually altered my system setup. I'm running a custom cooling loop. Some time ago, a neighbor of mine was throwing out a car radiator, an old brass car radiator, and I rescued this thing. So what I did was I modified it and soldered on inputs and outputs and a tap and everything so that it can be used on a PC. I've mounted this outside my office and plumbed the water cooling basically out the wall and into this cooling setup. This removes all of the fan noise and the pump noise that was in the room and pushes it outside. I'm still yet to do further treatment of the room. I actually have a few other bits of gear in here that are a bit noisy, like my UPS. I've got a big SAS array of hard disks that's a bit noisy too. I'm going to see if I can quieten them down to prevent them bleeding through into the recording. But at the moment, with the active filtering I'm using, I don't think you can hear any of it anyway. But there's a bit of processing needed after recording in order to clean this up and remove the last little dregs of it that sit around. Onto Looking Glass. Last week, performance profiling was done, and it became apparent that Microsoft have updated the DXGI API. It seems to be in the creators update for October 2018, they released the headers for DXGI version 1.5. What's important about it is that there's a new interface in 1.5 for the iDXGI output. The methods duplicate desktop 1. This differs from the original method because we can tell Windows what color and pixel formats we support. Before this version, Microsoft always assumed we're always going to want it in the format blue, green, red, alpha, 32-bit pixels. The problem is not everything renders into this format. A lot of titles, especially more the recent ones, are rendering into HDR 10-bit RGBA, so 10 bits red, 10 bits green, 10 bits blue, and 2 bits alpha. Still 32 bits, but the color space is high definition for the colors, which is excellent if you're running a 30-bit monitor. But as far as Looking Glass is concerned, what Windows was doing was taking this color buffer and in software converting it to BGRA, blue, green, red, alpha, 8 bits each. As you might imagine, this gets slow, especially on higher resolutions, and slows down the capture process. It's especially pointless when a capture comes in red, green, blue, so it's just reversed, red, green, blue, alpha. And Windows will do what's called swizzling, which is just swapping the bytes around so that it's blue, green, red, alpha again. And again, even though it's a simple operation, there is so many pixels to do this to, it is quite slow. Because we're taking the output and feeding it straight into another video card, and the video card is hardware capable of rendering most of these formats, we don't want it to do this. The new Capture API allows us to specify a list of formats we support, and if the format's already in that of the back buffer, Windows will just hand it to us raw. It won't try and do any conversions, at which point we just tell Looking Glass what format it is and what the ordering is of the bits, or if it's HDR. And if it does, it set up the textures in the host card in order to render it directly with no conversions or no swizzling. This won't improve performance in all titles. Some titles, actually a lot of titles still render in BGRA. Some titles render in RGBA, but I'm yet to find one that has a performance penalty for doing so with the swizzle. Depends on how loaded up the video card is and what it's doing. The other advantage to this is when we now get HDR 10-bit image from Windows, we can now hand that straight across. And if you're using the new EGL renderer, I've added support to it and it's able to take advantage of it. If you have a 30-bit monitor that's capable of HDR, it will now actually render it correctly. It won't mess with the colors. So not only is this faster, it uses the same amount of bandwidth, so there's no sort of slowdown for that, but you also get your color accuracy. Unfortunately, I haven't yet found time to update OpenGL for this. This new feature might actually even cause BGR RGB to be incorrect for the basic formats. You might see red and blue channels flipped and you'll get a funny color output. This will be fixed before we release the next version, but for the moment, the version in the Git master repository is broken. It also does not at all support HDR 10-bit for the OpenGL renderer, like the older renderer. I will probably be adding support for this, but at some point, if people are finding the EGL renderer works for them and we don't need to retain the OpenGL renderer, we'll probably remove it from the project. It just depends on whether or not we need to keep it around for support of legacy systems or older GPUs on the host. Probably not, because OpenGL ES3 has been around for a long time now. I would expect that anyone doing this kind of setup has pretty modern hardware, since you need the modern hardware to do the pass-through in the first place. As far as videos are concerned, I'm planning on trying to do some more stuff away from Looking Glass. I don't want this channel to be focused on the one technology or the one thing I'm working on. I've got a lot of friends that are really interested in the hosting and the management of systems I do. A lot of it's not so technical, it's more how to configure and build systems and how I like to run them in commercial and enterprise setups. I do a lot of free hosting and free management of systems for people that have open communities. For example, the EEVBlog over at http://eevblog.com. Their hosting currently I'm maintaining for the owner Dave, which contains a setup of 2 systems running as a cluster using a Puppet server to deploy all the configuration. That's a rather complex setup and we probably won't go into that. But there's a lot of knowledge that I've had and learned over the years, both through experience as well as from others passed on, that I think the community could benefit from in how to set up a basic VPS server to handle web hosting, mail hosting, DNS hosting, whatever you might need in a way that's not going to cost you a fortune to do it and that's maintainable. For example, a HTTP server that's high performance because we're going to avoid, say, Apache and use Nginx rather than using the older Apache engine. While I know a lot of people swear by Apache and you can get a lot of performance out of Apache, in my experience, Nginx just beats the pants off it and it should be used more often in my opinion. But that's for another video. If you got any feedback on this video or anything that you'd like to see in upcoming videos, especially along the lines of either Looking Glass or this hosting stuff, let me know in the comments below. I'll do my best to include them in the next one or answer your questions directly if it just warrants a simple answer. As always, all this work is done free. I don't actually make money off this. If you'd like to support what I do, Patreon and my PayPal donation and all of that will be in the description below. Your donations are very much appreciated and they help to fund this work. The cost to develop, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, is quite high. Obviously, it's my time, but because I own and operate my own business, my time is basically money. I have to be able to justify the time I put into Looking Glass and into these videos in order to continue making them and continue working on these systems. So I really do appreciate the support, and I think that's it for this video. Thank you very much for listening and your time.